First arrived in Cabo
Verde
Verde to present my credentials to President Pereira
in 1986. I was already aware that the president had been heavily involved in the anti-colonial movement, in organizing strikes, had worked as chief of communications in Guinea-Bissau, and had risen in the hierarchy of the PAIGC. It's also a matter of record that President Pereira and Prime Minister Pedro Pires dissolved the PAIGC 4 years later and replaced it with the PAICV in 1980. Clearly evident that under the president, Cabo Verde had a much better human rights record than almost all of the countries in Africa. Cabo Verde never had a death penalty. I was already favorably disposed toward President Pereira when I presented my credentials as the U.S. ambassador, and in my early dealings with President Pereira, he merited my highest respect. He was a man of his word and quickly earned my total trust and confidence. When I needed to speak to him, he always received me the same day with a soft-spoken manner. He was a man of peace, active in the growing international movement of non-alignment, which I reported. Most importantly, President Pereira was instrumental in one of the most important developments in my period of office as ambassador. I refer to the first armistice to end the war in Angola. I believe that the president had already discussed ending American involvement in the Angolan War in a private meeting he had with Vice President George Herbert Walker Bush in Washington before my arrival in Praia. But I was unaware of any concrete planning until I started receiving eyes-only communications, meaning only for me and not for anyone else in the embassy, from the Assistant Secretary for African Affairs, Chet Crocker. It involved bringing together the four combatant powers, Cuba, South Africa, Angola and the MPLA, and the US. I was instructed to arrange with President Pereira's support a meeting among representatives of these four countries at a private site in Cabo Verde out of the glare of any press or publicity. President Pereira put at the disposal of the four powers the use of one of his presidential houses on a relatively remote island in Cabo Verde. He also facilitated messages for the American president to the Angolan president. I was ordered not to make any commentary to these communications, but only to act on Washington's instructions. I did not participate in the subsequent meetings, which lasted a number of days. The meetings, however, resulted in the first armistice to bring an end to the years of bloody conflict in Angola. Within a year or two, Cabo Verde was beneficiary from the United States of a number of shipments of surplus wheat, corn, and rice, which the Cape Verdean government sold at local market rates. This was a win-win proposition because the funds raised were used to build small and large dams throughout the archipelago, so that when the rains came, the water just didn't run off out to sea. More importantly, peace was restored for the first time in Angola, thanks to President Pereira. There was another trait I admired in President Pereira. His smile was infectious, and he had a great sense of humor. In the years since my retirement in 2001, I have had the pleasure to visit some of the more remote, smaller Cape Verdean islands, and in particular the Boa Vista, where President Pereira was born and is buried. Written in the stone arch over the entrance to the cemetery are 6 words: Hoje para mim, amanhã para ti. That would appeal to President Pereira's sense of humor. And my wife and I always leave a banquet of flowers on his grave. President Pereira was a man of peace, a man of great dignity, whose vision reached far beyond the shores of Cabo Verde. He was a true man of the people, and I have always felt honored by the opportunity to serve in his country. Thank you for asking me to participate in the Amilcar Cabral Foundation's commemoration of the centenary of the birth of Aristides Pereira on November 17th. It is an honor.